Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar on Innovation 101. Before I turn it over to today's speaker, I'm going to just cover a couple of housekeeping items. We will be recording the webinar and we'll send out an email in the next day or two with a link to the webinar recording so you can review it again. If you need any assistance throughout the webinar, just hit us a chat message and we will respond. For questions related to the presentation, we ask that you use the Q&A button, and we'll have time for questions at the end of today's presentation. Today's webinar is brought to you by Industry Expansion Solutions, and we'll share a little more information about IES towards the end of the presentation. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to today's speaker, Kevin Grayson, who is with NC State's Industry Expansion Solutions. So, Kevin, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone, for joining this morning. I'm Kevin Grayson. I work with NC State University in our Industry Expansion Solutions group that Susan mentioned earlier. I am going to turn my video off just to save bandwidth, but I did want to let you know that I'm a real person, not a robot talking to you this morning. So I'm going to turn my video off and maybe turn it back on when there's Q&A time at the end. Okay, so let's go through this topic of Innovation 101, and this is a process that we have been using with some of our prospects and clients for several years now at IES, and so I'm going to hit some of the basics and talk about some of the fundamentals of this process. Okay, so here's what I plan to cover this morning: why innovate and why innovation is important. And what is innovation? We're going to go through a stepwise process for innovation. We find that most organizations do not have a defined process to innovate, and we have one that we would like to offer as a possible solution for that. And then we're going to cover three key factors that are important, and I believe that are important in any innovation process, and talk about how they impact the innovation process. And as Susan mentioned, we'll try to leave some time at the end of the webinar for some questions and answers. So let's first talk about how we define innovation. And if you go to Webster's dictionary, this is not going to be the definition that you find. But first of all, there's creativity just means that something is different. It doesn't necessarily mean that anything is valuable. And when I first started this, I thought creativity was the key component for innovation, and it certainly is important. But innovation goes beyond creativity. In fact, I heard an Apple executive say one time that creativity is one of the least important skills in innovation. And hopefully by the end of the webinar today, you'll see what he meant, or certainly ask me about that if it doesn't become clear. There's invention and technical creativity. And this means that you have something that is different and can be patented. And we have some new patent owners come to us each year and want help in trying to market and make their patent valuable. But I read a statistic that something to the effect of 91% of patents that are filed in this country never make money. So just because you have a patent doesn't mean that you have something that's valuable. So innovation means it needs to be meaningful and unique. And meaningful means there is a customer that you're solving a problem for that values your innovation, your new widget or process, whatever it is that you have created. And unique means it needs to be different or better than other options they have for solving that problem. So for us, our definition is innovation means it needs to be meaningfully unique. So that's our definition. Again, meaningful customer values it. Unique means it's different or better than other options that they have. We have this saying, if you're not meaningfully unique, you better be cheap. And some of you have probably experienced that, or maybe are experiencing that. We hear this a lot, in that, Kevin, our customers want cheap. They want cheap. Well, in our world, our language for this process is what that means is they do not see your solution, your product, your service, whatever it is, as being substantially or maybe not at all different than other options that are out that they have to solve the same problem. And because of that, they're going to buy on price, and they're going to buy cheap because they don't see your solution as being better than what other options they have. If you think about your personal life, there are probably things that you buy cheap, and there's probably things that you don't. And I'll give you two for mine. I travel a lot across the state and visit with our clients and prospects across North Carolina. And so I get paid a mileage rate. And so the price of gasoline is very important to me. But I've never felt like anyone's 87 octane is different than anyone else's. So I buy gas cheap. I buy gas on price, and I'll look at every gas price as I drive and try to always be sure I'm buying the cheapest gas. As I travel, though, there's another thing that I do often as well, and that's stop in for coffee. I go to this place called Starbucks a lot. And if you know anything about Starbucks, their coffee is not the cheapest. And so those are two for mine. One I see is not different, and so I buy cheap. I buy on price. The other one I do see is different and better than, and so I don't buy on price. And you probably have your same. So there's many places to innovate, and we believe this process works fine for all of these. In fact, over the past 10 years, I have helped companies in all of these different areas. But the one that I have highlighted there is new products. And I would say that probably 80% of the organizations that I've worked with in this process have been innovating around new products. But if you're need to innovate around new services or new marketing methods or new manufacturing processes, I have helped companies, and we believe this same process works across the board. But most of the examples in this presentation are centered around products because that's what most people use it for, we find. There can be process innovations. This one, probably you don't see as innovative, particularly innovative so much now because it's been around for a while, and some of these examples have been around. But for many years, there were no drive-through lanes, and then drive-through lanes came around, and then many places have double drive-through lanes now, and so processes can be changed. Processes can be innovative. There's a quote here from Steve. So why innovate? That's the next topic we want to talk about. Why innovate? And there's a Steve Jobs quote here. Innovation distinguishes between being a leader and a follower. And I think most of us would like to work for organizations or be, associated with organizations that are seen as leaders versus followers. There's also the negative reason. And so I show these pictures, when I do this class and some of our training, and this, quite frankly, now has become more of an age test than anything else. Some people have never seen some of these things. And when I started 10 years ago, I didn't realize it. But in the top left side there is an oil can spout. And many of us have never seen these things before. If you have a little gray hair like me, you probably have or can remember these. But we used to slam these things into a can of oil, and then the cans of oil became plastic bottles, and so the need for a spout went away. But the thing here is, no matter how well you're making these products, and of course Kodak didn't make defective film. Kodak was a leader in making film. But if what you're making the customer needs for that product goes away, and if you don't have another product or another portfolio coming down the line, it doesn't matter how good your quality is. It doesn't matter how good your marketing methods are. You're going to go out of business. Your product or key product, or maybe your company, is going to go out of business. So there's the negative aspect of why you can fail if you're not innovative, because you can be making a superior product. You can be the leader in your market. Your quality methods and quality results can be outstanding. But if the need for what you're making goes away, you can be in real trouble real fast. And so that's the negative side of innovation. There's the business life cycle curve that plays into this, and all products kind of this business life cycle curve. If you took a business class in school, you probably saw this. On the left side of the curve is the early development, where your product or your service, your new offering is in the startup mode. The slide here calls it the childhood phase. Then you go into the left side where you really, the curve starts up at a high angle, and you're making high profits, and things are very good. Then you cross over the curve and you start declining. Your profits start decline, and maybe competition is starting to come in. Maybe the market is starting to saturate. There can be lots of reasons for this. And then at the end, the product, and it goes out of business. And essentially all products go through this cycle. Some of them, the x-axis here is time, and some of them, may last decades, or maybe even over 100 years before they go completely out. But everything has this cycle, and in today's technology, many things have a very short lifespan. A cell phone, it's not probably doesn't last but just 2 or 3 years before it is replaced with the next model. Cars are replaced with the next model each year. So all products and services go through this, but the time span on the x-axis can be very different. So we ask companies how, where you fit on this curve, and we ask we ask 3 questions, and I'll share some of the data, or at least a couple of the questions maybe at the end. Where do you fit? Where do you see your organization or your key product line on this curve? And you might want to think about that now. Where do you see your organization or the key product that you manufacture or serve your clients with on this curve? But innovation is about, let's just start another curve. And so instead of going down the right side or the decline side of the curve, let's just start another one. And so this one shows us starting another curve at the peak of the curve that we're currently on. But this curve could be started on the new curve, could be started on the left side. It could be started on the right side. It doesn't always have to be started at the top. It can be started at different places. In fact, I would argue that people that start curves on the new curves on the left side of the curve when their current products are still growing are the most innovative companies in that we come across. There's an innovation. Fortune does a top 100 innovative companies, and usually, or last few years, Apple has been at the top of that. I haven't seen it in a couple of years, so maybe they're not at the top now. But our Apple starts another iPhone really when their iPhone business, their current model, is still doing well in the market. But they'll come out with a new one. I think they just released one in the last few days, and it has new features and new things on it. And so Apple is an example of a company that likes to start another curve on the left side of the curve. But it doesn't always have to be technology. This is, Procter & Gamble, that makes Tide, claims that they've had 61 innovation in 61 years with Tide. And, I feel certain that some of this is not the product, although the product has changed. It went from a powder to a liquid into pods and to Tide on a stick, and all kinds of, they have changed the product. But I think some of these innovations are also in the packaging. Somebody decided to put the liquid in a plastic jug. Somebody decided to put a handle in the plastic jug. Later on, maybe they put a cap on the plastic jug, and later on, the cap maybe could be used as a filling cup or a measuring device, and so on. So I think some of these innovations that they're claiming are also with the packaging. But Tide is a product that's sold at Walmart. But if you go to Walmart, or at least the Walmart I go to in my hometown, Tide commands at Walmart about a 20% premium versus its competitor that's right next to it on the same shelf at Walmart. So even a low-tech product, or at least I feel like, to me, laundry detergent is a low-tech product. Innovation is allowing them to claim a considerable price margin, competitive advantage against a competitive product that's on the same shelf at Walmart. So, and of course, down at the bottom, these iPods have changed, and I think they're gone now because of the iPhones, or the phones that we use. So, it can be a high-tech product, but it doesn't have to be a high-tech product. So a lot of times people think about innovation as being something that has to be high-tech, but that's not necessarily the case. So I told you we asked some questions, and first of all, we found that we're part of a NIST MEP Manufacturing Extension Network, and so there's a organization like us in every state in the country. And this was done across the nation. We asked 7,000 companies. It really should say 7,000 participants. I don't think it was 7,000 companies because many of these companies sent multiple participants. But over the nation, we did these surveys, and we found that 86% of the people identified themselves as being on the right side, kind of in the cost-cutting mode to maintain their margins, the decline side of the curve. And only 14% of them people identified themselves on the left side or the growth side of the curve. So when I asked that question earlier, where do you see your company or your organization or your key product line? If you are on the right side or the decline side of the curve, you have company. So we found that many people see that. But we asked a question of people, and we found, what are your profit margins? How much growth have you seen in profit margins the last 3 years? And for the 14% that were on the left side of the curve, 96% of them said they had seen project margin growth. For the 86% that were on the right side of the curve, only 13% had said they saw project profit margin growth. So a very different response rate here, a very different performance level on this one aspect of the business, which is a very important aspect of the business, just depending on which side of the curve you're on. So another reason we need to innovate. So I ask companies a lot times, where do you innovate or how do you get ideas for innovation? So let's move into where we might get ideas. And most people, if they have a process or if they have a source, it's almost always voice of the customer. We use voice of the customer, and I'm not against voice of the customer. We teach it in our Six Sigma courses, and but there are some limitations to voice of the customer. So I want to be sure if you are using voice of the customer, you understand at least these two limitations. There's probably some others. The most classical one is the Henry Ford quote. You probably have heard it through the years. If I'd asked people what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. And I think we're all guilty of that. In other words, your customers often can only see you in what you're doing for them now. They cannot picture you making a different product or a different service. And so they will just say, make me a faster one, make me a bigger one, make me a cheaper one of what you're doing now, because they can't envision you doing something else. But you quite possibly could do other things and create other solutions. And I think of myself as being guilty of that sometimes, and you may have done this as well. But when you stand in a line at the checkout line at the grocery store or at Walmart or wherever, and there's a long line, you might turn to the person, that's in front of you in the line or behind you in the line as you're waiting and impatiently, and you might say, I wish they would open up some more registers, because you can see that they have 4 or 5 registers perhaps that aren't open, and the register and going through the checkout line is what's causing the delay. Well, you're saying that because that's what you see, but there could be other solutions to this problem. There could be online ordering, there could be curbside pickup, but because you see what's in front of you and what's the issue is, you might say, well, the only solution or the best solution is to open up some more registers. But there could be other more innovative ways to solve that problem, such as online ordering, curbside pickup, et cetera, et cetera. So I think we all have been guilty of that, but that's a classic Henry Ford quote that's been around, I guess for 100 years or more or whatever. Here's another one that I talked to a CEO in Charlotte about one time, and I never thought about this one. He said, when customers come through the door with a project, we're good at creating a solution for them, and we get the business, and we make good margins on those projects. So the first 2 sentences sounds like he's a fan of voice of the customer. But there's a but in here. And the but is the problem. I can't control how fast the customers come through my door. I've got to create my own products to survive. And this is one I never thought about. And this was kind of coming in this was in a period of a kind of a slowdown. And so customers had quit coming through the doors with projects and potential things that he could help them with. And so he's like, I've got to do something to create my own products or I'm not going to survive because I've been waiting on customers. And for years they came through the doors, but because of the slowdown, they haven't. So that's another problem with voice of the customer. Again, I'm not against voice of the customer. We actually have a way that we use voice of the customer in this process. We call it and do it maybe a little differently than what you've seen before, but I just wanted you to be aware of the limitations of voice of the customer. So we're going to talk about next, why are companies not using an innovation as a growth strategy? That's going to be our next topic, and I'm going to have a period for questions and answers at the end, but I'll pause just a second to see, are there any questions so far before we go into the next topic here?
Just a reminder, you can submit your questions through the Q&A.
Okay, I'll take that as none. And again, you will have time at the end to ask questions again, but I just wanted to take that pause. So let's move forward and talk about why organizations are not using innovation more as a strategy. Problem number one is it takes a long time to see results. So if you start creating a new product today, depending on your product or your service, you may not reap any revenues or benefit from that new product for weeks, months, maybe years, depending on what it is that you're developing. So that's one problem. And the second problem is it can be risky. In other words, if you start creating a new product today, and I don't know, maybe it's going to be 6 months or 2 years before it hits the market, are people going to buy it? Maybe you think you're developing something, this new great widget or this new great service, but people, your customers, don't see it that way. And so you may be wrong. And so you may have sunk investment dollars and research dollars into a new product or new service, and it's not going to pan out financially. So this innovation process that we want to cover today needs to address these two problems. It will not completely eliminate either one of them. It's always going to take some time to develop something that's innovative, and there's always going to be some uncertainty or some risk, but we can manage it, and we have some ways to manage that and to minimize that risk. But just keep those two issues in mind, and this is one that these two issues are the reasons that many organizations stray away from innovation and advancing. This Innovation Academy that we cover with companies, and I can't get into the details of this, we just don't have time, but I wanted to let you know there are, in many ways, it is a systems approach, and some of you are coming from organizations or have been associated with organizations that are ISO 9000. And so in many ways, even though it's different than a quality system, there's some common themes across this systems approach. It has some roles, such as champion and a process coach. And again, I'm not going to be able to get into all these different roles in this short webinar. We get into these in greater detail when we do our half-day class. There's some different tools that we use, some creativity tools and some tools. And I will share just briefly share some of the tools. There's different levels of training. Basic, intermediate, and advanced training, are kind of the low level of training for this process is a half-day class. And then we have an intermediate 2-day class. And then there's some more advanced, longer-term training that if you want to get involved with it, there's some coaching and mentoring that goes on in the process. There are goals. We set up goals and measured results in the process. And there's organizations that have software that can help manage the process. So again, it's a very systems approach. It's not one thing. And some of this we'll be able to touch on in this webinar, and some we just can't get to because of the time constraint. But here is our 5-step process for innovation. If you're familiar with Six Sigma, it also happens to have a 5-step process DMAIC, define, measure, analyze, improve, control. This one happens to have a 5-step process as well. But, obviously the steps are different and we're doing something different. The first step is creating new ideas. And we're going to spend some time on that this morning on how we do that and some techniques that we might use to create new ideas. The second step is to define the ideas in great detail such that we know we're very clear on who the customer is that could benefit from this idea and how it could impact their life, if you will. The third phase is to discover. And what we mean by discover is what could go wrong with this idea, what could keep it from working. And we really want to be sure that we remove these obstacles and address these obstacles. The development phase is essentially the same development phase that you have now. So if you use StageGate, keep it. You'll use it again in this development phase, assuming it's working for you. If you use Design for Six Sigma to develop products, keep it. That's where it would fit in this process. So that's not new. And then the last phase is deliver. We want to deliver this innovation to the market, to our customers, which could be internal customers, and let them reap the benefit. And of course, hopefully we'll reap the money. You see the dollar sign. So this is our 5-stage process that we use in innovation. We use create tools in the ideation stage, the first phase. And I'm going to show you how one of these create tools can work. But the big thing here we want to do is help stimulate ideas, stimulate lots of ideas with our innovation team members. Some of you might have done a version of this. Brainstorming is a tool. We don't use brainstorming. We do the create part of this in a different manner. We think brainstorming has some limitations to it. Although we kind of use a version of it or a modification of brainstorming, if you will. I want to talk about the 3 factors that influence creativity and creating ideas. And these 3 factors that we need to understand how they work are stimulus, diversity, and fear. And so the S stands for stimulus, the D is diversity, and fear is the what you see on the denominator there. So if you remember from math, and we call this the innovation equation, although there's not specific numbers to these are just factors. But if you remember from math, if you're trying to maximize or make something big, the things that are in the numerator, you want to make them as big as possible. And the things that are in the denominator, you want to make them small as possible. So we work to make stimulus big. To maximize stimulus, we work to maximize diversity, and we try to minimize fear. And all of these, I'll show you how we work to do that. So let's first talk about stimulus. Studies have shown that you think when you have stimulus, you're going to create more ideas. You're going to create better ideas, and stimulus can come from a lot of places. Some people say they come up with their best ideas and when they're out hiking and looking at nature. And so if that's you, that means that nature is a stimulus for you to help create ideas. So there's different ways. We won't do this little exercise, but this is one that when we're in our half-day class we do, and I'll explain how it works. I ask, give you 60 seconds, write down as many places as you can think of where you might want to go on vacation. Go, write as many as you can. And so give you 60 seconds to do that. And usually, I don't know, we tally up our tables. We'll be sitting at tables and we'll tally up how many. We might get, I don't know, maybe 30 ideas in 60 seconds from 4 or 5 people at a table, maybe 5 or 6 each, maybe 30 ideas at a table, let's say. And then I'll show this. So this is, what we would call visual stimulus. And so what I'll ask you to repeat that exercise. Now write down as many places as you can think of to go on vacation. And what we find is that you'll create in the same amount of time, usually about 20 or 30% more ideas when you have this visual stimulus. It doesn't work for everyone. So often if I'm in a class, if I'm doing a class, this half-day workshop, and maybe there's 30 people in the class, usually there's one or two that actually this hurts. They spend more time staring at the pictures, and they say that, this just didn't work for me. But I will say for maybe 28 of the 30 people, this does work. It increases. And so we will total up our table totals again, and maybe we'll go from 30 ideas in 60 seconds, maybe to 40 ideas in 60 seconds. So it's usually about a 20% increase in the number of ideas. So this is just a little quick example exercise of how stimulus can help us generate more ideas in the same period of time. And so we believe that using stimulus in our create sessions is very important, and we work to do that. So most ideas are some feats of association, so you see something and that makes you think of something else. And, it doesn't have to be nature. It doesn't have to be a picture. There can be different ways of thinking about or getting an idea from something else. So we try to take advantage of that and use these different creativity tools to help us create that. So there can be lots of different types of stimulus. I don't have a lot of time to go into this. We don't spend even a lot of time with this in our half-day workshop, but there can be free association and related stimulus. There can be unrelated stimulus and forced association. There's a lot of different methods to use for creating stimulus, but stimulus is in the numerator. And so it's one of the things that we seek to maximize in our creativity sessions. Another thing that's in the numerator is diversity. And so we want to, similar to stimulus, when we have diversity, we create more ideas. We probably have all heard the saying, 2 heads are better than 1. Well, if 2 heads are better than 1, 3's better than 2, and so on. So we want to get more heads around the table, if you will. And we just don't want more heads, but we want heads that have different perspectives. And so there's different ways to think about diversity, but it can be your frame of reference, your point of view, your life experiences. How long have you been at the company? Different education, different. There's many ways to come up with different diversity. When I go to organizations, though, I say, I need sometimes organizations will want me to help facilitate some of the early create sessions because they haven't done these before and they want somebody to facilitate them. And before I get there, I'll say, I'm going to be there next week, but just a reminder, I need a diverse team. To create the ideas. I'm not going to be creating ideas. I'm just facilitating the session. You guys are going to be creating the ideas, but it's important that I have a diverse team. And they'll say, Kevin, we've got you a diverse team. We've got somebody from quality. We've got someone from shipping. We've got someone from the HR. And so almost always organizations think about diversity based on the department where the person works, but there can be many ways to think about diversity. And just a few of them are on the screen now. So I would just challenge you that if you're trying to put together a diverse team for anything, don't just think about departments. Think outside the the boxes on the organizational chart, if you will. So we want to maximize diversity. And the reason is, we talked about stimulus earlier. Here's a stimulus. If I show you a picture of a rose and say, what does that make you think of? I want somebody to say, that makes me think of beauty. I want somebody to say, the rose makes me think of tango. I want somebody to say, it makes me think of vitamin C tea. If everybody says Valentine's Day, Valentine's Day, Valentine's Day, Valentine's Day, then there's a good chance I don't have diversity on my team. So that's why I'm going to show one stimulus, but when I show one stimulus, I want to have several different thoughts. And so that's why diversity is so important, and we need diversity in this process. So diversity is also in the numerator. We want to maximize that. And again, the main way is to think through all the different possibilities. Maybe the most important thing in this equation is fear. And because we're creating something new, when we're doing innovation, we're creating something that doesn't exist now, and we need to drive out. No, we won't eliminate, but try to minimize fear. And fear is a natural reaction because we may be wrong. The customer may not value our new widget, our new service, our new product, our new marketing method, whatever it is that we're creating. So we may be wrong. So we may have fear. The way we address fear is to to reclassify our obstacles as death threats. And this may be the most important thing that we're covering this morning, and we spend a lot more time on this, especially in the 2-day class. But if you think about, if you've been sitting around a meeting, and you say, well, how about if we do it in this manner, and you throw out an idea, almost always someone will say, well, that won't work because of this reason. Or how about, the reason that won't work is we tried it before and this stopped up from that idea that you have from working. Anything that person says, we would classify as a death threat. In other words, this is a reason this idea may not advance. This is a reason this idea may not work. And so, unfortunately, in many business environments, if that person who has the idea doesn't have a solution immediately to that person's death threat that they've thrown out, we kill that idea. Well, maybe there is a solution to that death threat, but it's going to take some thinking. It's going to take some time. It may take some experimenting, and we shouldn't kill that idea. But because that person doesn't have a solution right on the top of their head to that death threat, we often kill the idea right there, in the boardroom. And so that's not the best process. So in this process, we're going to give that person some time to see if they can resolve that death threat. And if they can, if that death threat can be resolved, we advance the idea. So, I'm going to get into, or going to sum up here just what we've covered, but I want to spend just a couple more minutes because we have a little bit more time on death threats. So if in the process we use on resolving death threats is PDSA, Plan, Do, Study, Act. Some of you may have seen this as Plan, Do, Check, Act. So in our process to resolve death threats, what is the plan? We'll ask this person, okay, so there's a death threat that may kill your idea. What's your plan to resolve that death threat? We give you a time period to do that, usually a week, to go see if you can get an answer for that. It may require talking to a supplier. It may require some experimentation. It may require you creating a drawing. It may require you making some measurements. There's, all kinds of ways we can solve this death threat. And then in a week, we come back together as our innovation team, and the study is, what did you learn? What did you learn as you tried to resolve that death threat? And basically what happens is you say, yes, this death threat can be resolved. And here's why. Here's what I learned in the last week. And if so, the idea advances. It advances to the next death threat. And if there are no more death threats, it advances to the development stage. And so this is our method to advance or kill ideas. So when we come back in the next week is, what did you learn? And you say, well, Sally was right. That death threat, there doesn't seem to be any way to resolve that issue, and it kills the idea. So we have a very defined way to advance the idea. The death threat can be resolved, or kill the idea. The death threat cannot be resolved. So we have a very defined and relatively fast way to advance the idea and kill the idea. And that's another thing that I find when I talk to organizations is they don't have a good way to advance and kill ideas. Things just kind of sit around for weeks and months and people think about them, but we want to work fast to advance the idea. And for that to happen, we got to address these death threats, these possible obstacles, and see if there's solutions to those. That is the real crux of this process, and thus that's the reason the Apple executives said creativity is not so important. It's really the problem solving that goes on to resolve these death threats that's so important. And if you look at I've talked to some people, a few of the people that come to us through that are asking help on patents, and they haven't used this process. They've done their innovation as a one person. They didn't have any diversity. Something they came up with usually is the process. But I'll ask them, what obstacles did you had to resolve? And they can talk through this. Oh, I had this, and it wouldn't fit it at the beginning, and I used the wrong material at the beginning, and I found that the materials didn't work, and I had to change the material. And so they've resolved death threats throughout their process when they created their new device that they got patented. And so even though they didn't use this terminology, they went through this PDSA process. They usually did it by themselves. And so they went through this process even though they didn't use that language. So let's kind of sum up here what we've talked about and use the remainder of time for Q&A. I think there are some questions coming in, and that's great. We define innovation as being meaningfully unique. Meaningful means it is a customer, and it could be an internal customer that has a problem that values our solution, and unique means the solution that we have provided them is better than other options that they have, and so they're willing to use and buy our solution and maybe pay us even more money for it than what other options are. Innovation equals more profits. You know, we showed you the example of Tide, and there was some data that we collected, and you probably have seen this in better and more studies than what I provided in this webinar, but innovation equals more profits. The business life cycle curve matters because everything goes through that. And so many people are on the right side. 86% we found identified themselves as being on the right side or the decline side of the curve. And we work with a lot of organizations in that space. They're trying to improve the productivity. They're trying to implement Lean or Six Sigma to protect their margins because their margins are under pressure. But there's another solution in addition to Lean and Six Sigma and increasing productivity. And we're not against those. We spend a lot of time helping companies in that space. There's another possibility there, and that's just to create another curve. There is a process for innovation. Again, I didn't have time to get into it in great details. We spend more time in the longer training sessions, but there's a 5-step process that we use in this, to create ideas and to advance ideas, not just to create them. It's nice to create ideas, have brainstorming. That's the problem. One of the problems with brainstorming, we create a lot of ideas, but we don't have a good process to advance those ideas, to make them move forward. And then we covered the 3 factors that influence innovation. That's stimulus and diversity. Those 2 are in the numerator. So we really worked hard to increase and maximize stimulus and diversity, and we reduce fear. Is in the denominator. So we want our main method to reduce fear is just to reclassify any obstacle or any objection to our idea as a death threat, and then go see and problem solve it and see if we can fix that. So that was what we covered today. This is my contact information if you have more questions or like to speak into more detail. But I want to use the remainder of the time that we have to answer questions. So if Susan, if someone out there could help me see the questions that have come in, I'll be glad to address them.
Okay, Kevin, thank you so much.